The story begins with the fact that after lunch the weather was sunny outside. It was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. In a cafe with an interesting name, Turn the Corner to Meet Your Love, there was the main character. Yi Ning was the author of Manhua, and while drinking coffee, he was looking through reviews of his latest work. Suddenly he came across one of them. A certain Su Liner asked him not to go home today, as he might die. The girl called herself a fan, but after looking at her profile, Yi did not find a subscription to his channel. Ning assumed that she was crazy and did not take this comment seriously. The young man noticed that the stipulated time for the blind date had already passed. At that moment, the front door to the cafe opened and a rather pretty girl walked inside. Meanwhile, Yi was thinking that he needed to write a couple of chapters today so that the editor would not be nervous. Seeing the stunning beauty on the threshold of the establishment, the main character literally froze. Ning suggested that she could be the same girl with whom he agreed to meet, after which he moderated his ardor, thinking that such girls usually hang around influential and rich men. But when Yi saw the stranger heading towards him, he was surprised. A couple of seconds later, the unknown woman sat down at his table and kindly greeted him. The lady then asked if she could join him for lunch. Confused, the young man replied that he was waiting for someone and was doing a fairly profitable job. She introduced herself as Tang Qingru and asked if it was Yi Ning with whom she had agreed to meet. Then she showed him their correspondence about this agreement. The guy didn't know how to react, because the girl really turned out to be his partner on a blind date. The young man, in turn, hurriedly closed his laptop and declared that he was Yi Ning. The main character instantly complimented her and offered her a drink. However, the young lady urged him to be more frank and not pretend to be such a polite and caring guy, adding that if he wants, they can go and get married. Since she really likes him, Yi was shocked. Ning immediately suspected something was wrong, because this doesn't happen. Even if she likes him, no one will agree to marry so quickly. The young guy handed her napkins and said that he was happy with everything, but she was clearly rushing things. Qingzhou said that they should not waste time, especially if they like each other. But Ning insisted on a more traditional approach to relationships, and initially it was necessary to get to know each other better. Tan immediately stated that she held a high position in the company and had a car and a huge house. Yi became wary and asked why she needed someone like him if she was doing well, and besides, wealthy guys were obviously courting her. Qingzhou again said that she liked him very much and this is a good reason. The main character noticed that by appearance it is impossible to understand whether a person was suitable for you or not. Yi suggested that they meet her for a couple of months, and if everything goes well, they will talk about marriage. Tan agreed to everything quite easily and invited him to watch a movie after dinner. Ning didn't understand what the catch was and decided to continue playing this exciting game. Unexpectedly, the young man invited her to spend the night together, believing that she would refuse. However, having pointedly put the coffee on the table, Qingzhou gladly agreed to this pastime. Yi understood perfectly well that this was not normal, because a girl should not agree to such a thing. Suddenly, Qingzhou stood up and, reaching out to him, said that she was ready for anything, adding that she is not going to return home today and does not advise him to have a good time. Ning tried in every possible way to pacify her and not to rush things. Tan noticed that he was unusually handsome. After a while, they walked towards the exit in an embrace. The guy invited her to go to his house, but Qingzhou wanted to go to the hotel. However, the main character insisted on going to his house. The girl also did not yield to him and stated that she would personally pay for any hotel he chose. Perplexed, Yi asked why she so easily agrees to everything except going to him, adding that he might die if he returned home. The young man thus intended to test the lady, but Qingzhou was surprised and pretended that she did not understand what he was talking about. Then Yi decided to tell her directly that it was she who wrote that comment under his post. Tan admitted that he might actually die if he went home, but she didn't write that review. Moreover, she did not want to harm him, which she immediately began to convince him of. The strange girl continued to say that from tomorrow a catastrophe will hit the world and big changes are coming, and she actually came from the future and is his wife. The guy was shocked by this information, and everything happened exactly this way, because she was reincarnated, which was extremely difficult to believe. After which they decided to go to the cinema, where Qingzhou snuggled up to Yi. Then they visited the nearest summer cafe and had a pleasant conversation about life topics. When Tan paid the bill at the establishment, Ning felt embarrassed that a girl was paying for it. However, she didn't need his money, the stranger seemed nice enough. Ultimately, they came to the hotel, where Qingzhou again hurried to pay for the services. The guy understood that she could afford it. But when the young man heard that she had rented one large room, he was afraid. Ning hurriedly ran to the reception and, placing his card on the table, demanded 2 separate rooms. Since Tan really was an extremely strange and suspicious person, the main character could not get her words out of his head about the imminent disaster that would occur at 12 at night. In addition, Qingzhou stated that in the near future he would become the king of the world, which was difficult to believe, because Yi was just the author of a manhwa. The guy thought she was just a crazy person who should be kept away from. At that moment, he received a message from her on his phone, where Tan told him that she had taken a shower, after which she sent him a rather racy photo. Ning was shocked by her immodest behavior, but realizing that this was a trap, the future ruler threw the phone aside and rested his head on the pillow. He made a decision: if no disaster happens after 12 at night, he will go to her room. Taking the phone in his hands, the young man wondered why she no longer sent photos or wrote to him. Having opened their correspondence, Yi once again looked at the stranger, at which time he received a notification from Su Linner, where the girl informed him about what was in his house and asked him to choose the divine method of cultivation. Ning assumed that this was some kind of ridiculous game and blocked it, because there were no cultivators in the current world. Exactly at 12 at night the alarm clock rang. The main character hurried to turn it off and continued to look at the ceiling. Yi realized that it was a deception, since no disaster occurred and Tan simply fooled him. However, at that moment, a certain panel appeared in front of him, in which he was greeted with entering a new era. Then the next notification was displayed, which spoke of the only choice of humanity, and they must decide. After which he was given the choice of cultivation, divine or demonic. Stunned, Ning realized that this was true and Liner and Qingzhou had indeed been reincarnated. In this connection, the guy hurried to get dressed and find Tan to find out about further actions. But initially the young man needed to decide on the type of cultivation. Suddenly Yi heard someone's footsteps outside the door and assumed that it was Qingzhou coming towards him. Ning knew that from now on he should be more careful and check everything first. Looking through the door peephole, he discovered a monster. The young man instantly backed away. A couple of seconds later, the monster began to knock loudly on the door. He didn't know what to do. A few moments later, the front door literally shattered into small pieces, and Ning flew to the side. As a result, a huge monster stood in front of him, which stared at him with its terrifying gaze. The main character began to panic and think that he could really die now. The monster stretched out its decrepit hands to him. At that moment Tan arrived to help. Qingru dealt a crushing blow to the demon with her dagger. This time she was wearing battle armor. The girl proudly declared that the monster would not harm her husband while she was here. However, the next moment the monster attacked her, and the wounded Tang subsequently fell to the floor. Ning hurried to help her get up and worriedly asked if she was alive. Qingru replied in a choked voice that she would protect him, but she would need help. The bloody-named wife asked him to choose demonic cultivation to kill this demon. Yi realized that in fact the divine path was not the strongest and it was worth choosing another. After which Tang again began to fight the monster and urged the guy to choose the demonic cultivation method. The young man noticed that since he draws comics, he knows about the superiority of the demonic path. Smiling, Qingzhou said that he was able to conduct such an accurate analysis and this is pleasing. At this moment, the monster rushed to attack again, but the girl fought back quite skillfully. She stated that demonic cultivation is the basis of this world, and by uniting they can destroy all evil spirits. Ning thanked her for her help and unexpectedly said that he loved his wife. Then he reached out to hug her, which was a real shock for Tan, especially in this situation. Suddenly the girl struck Yi, but the guy, in turn, managed to dodge. Ning was finally convinced that she had lied to him and was deliberately trying to induce him into demonic cultivation. At the same moment, the main character said goodbye to her and hurried to leave the room. Meanwhile, the monster rushed into another attack, but Tan easily eliminated the demon with one blow. He ran out into the corridor, where there was a panicked crowd of people, but there was no elevator in the hotel. The young man understood that both stairs were blocked and there was no other way out except to jump down. Suddenly, he received a message from the system that the rate of plant evolution and the frequency of mutations had increased. Going down, he came across a huge wolf, who in turn also noticed him. Ning realized that he was extremely lucky to meet only 2 monsters. The guy picked up the trash can and declared that he was not afraid of it, after which the future king threw a bucket at the monster, intending to kill him. However, a huge wolf-like beast instantly smashed it, and debris fell to the ground. He realized that the demon was too dangerous and the only right decision was to run away. He was followed by Qingzhou, who easily dealt with the monster. Tan assumed that Ning was rushing home and took out a notepad with her said husband's home address written down. Meanwhile, the guy bet on Su, since Zhou could not be trusted. He actually headed to his home, believing that Liner was still there. At that moment, a huge number of messages from various people who asked for help appeared in front of him. Others, on the contrary, gained unprecedented strength and dealt with monsters. The young man intended to decide on cultivation. Understanding that this is not a factional affiliation, but simply a class system. It was like a computer game where you could be a magician or a fighter. He still chose the divine path. Ning relied on magical abilities, but did not understand what the formula for maintaining qi meant. The system notified the owner about the class confirmation and loaded interface elements, after which a message was displayed in front of him that his potential for various skills reaches 100%. At this time, the main character discovered a large bird flying towards him overhead. It suddenly dawned on him that this was the same red-tailed hawk with 4 legs that he had drawn in the comics. This means that all the monsters like a harpy or a kobold hunter that he drew existed in this world. Suddenly, his path was again blocked by a huge demonic wolf. Ning could not believe that with his royal abilities he could die now. Even though he didn't understand why monsters appeared out of nowhere, he wasn't going to give up. Looking around, the guy saw a store with broken windows and hurried to run there, thereby luring the animal into the cage to make it claustrophobic. Naturally, a bloodthirsty demon followed him, in search of his prey. At that moment, the main character threw a rag over him, so he bought himself some time. As expected, the monster completely forgot about its victim and tried to get out. Meanwhile, Ning hastily grabbed a stone and hurried to strike the captured beast. As a result, the monster crashed like a dead weight to the ground. Suddenly, a little girl with fox ears grabbed him by the leg. The baby called him her dad and said that she had been waiting for his appearance for a very long time. He sat down next to her, tearing her away from his leg, and said that she had mistaken herself and he was not her father. However, the fox claimed that her mother asked her to wait here and said that the first one to come to her was her father. The young man tried to explain to her that they could not be relatives, since he did not have a fox tail or ears. In response, the girl stated that her mother also did not have a tail or ears and that she looked like a person. Ning could not understand how a person could give birth to a demon and asked the child what her name was. The tear-stained fox, sobbing, said that she had a rather beautiful name, Daji. He was literally taken aback, because in fact she was the queen of demons. The guy realized that people can certainly awaken special abilities by killing various monsters. The girl immediately rushed into his arms. He was sincerely sorry for the little girl. Suddenly Daji said that her mother asked her to give her father a gift. Ning asked what they were talking about. The fox pointed to the door and said that he was there. Having gone to a certain warehouse, which turned out to be behind the door, found a suitcase with a lock. The main character asked if Mom said what was there. The girl, in turn, saw a doll in the suitcase, which she said, adding that she has the ability to see through objects and even around buildings. He asked her a logical question: what else was happening near this building? Daji assured him that there were no demons nearby, after which she literally gave him a map of the location of all buildings within a radius of 100 meters, and what was happening on the streets. Ning was shocked by the child's ability, but such a skill was definitely useful. Then the guy broke the lock on the suitcase with a stone in order to find out what was in it. Opening it, the young man found a paper doll and was surprised, because he did not understand why it was needed. The girl, in turn, instantly grabbed her and shouted loudly that she was right. But after a couple of seconds, a sudden green flame literally incinerated the doll in Daji's hands, after which she burst into tears, because she thought that she had broken her father's gift. He hastened to calm her down. He noticed that the doll's design was displayed on the fox's tiny hand. The girl got scared and shook it aside, so a magical green light stretched along the warehouse. Suddenly the doll ended up on one of the boxes lying to the side. Then the doll climbed off the box onto the floor. Daji asked her dad what happened to her. Ning remembered that this was a demonic origami of 365 techniques. At that moment, the fox took the paper doll by the hand and began to dance with it, calling on her father to play with them. However, he was interested in something completely different. Yi asked her where her mother had gone. The girl replied that her mother killed 2 evil dogs and drove the third one out into the street. Then she said that she needed to wait for her dad to arrive, who would definitely come here. Ning understood the most important thing, that Daji did not pose a threat, but first of all, it was necessary to find Liner. The main character decided to play along with her, and, calling himself dad, he sat her on his shoulders. The fox showed him the way with the help of her map, and subsequently they were able to bypass all the dangerous places where the monsters wandered. After a certain time, they approached a tall building. The named daughter noticed that this was the place they needed. After the advent of a new era, the city plunged into chaos. The terrifying screams of people and monsters were heard from the dark alleys. The desperate and frightened people tried in every possible way to escape, but not everyone was able to do this. In this sense, Yi was extremely lucky with the useful abilities of the little girl. Suddenly, 2 people armed with a knife and a tire iron approached them from the house. They recognized the young man as their neighbor from apartment 302, and were surprised by the presence of a demonic fox. Ning, in turn, also recognized them. The neighbors asked where he found this girl. The guys wanted to find out where they could get a demonic pet, and began to make friends with him. Yi replied that if they chose the demonic path, then they need to find an old man on the street who will give them a task, and then a pet. The young people invited the main character to go with them, since it was quite dangerous on the street. The young man said that he needed to pick up something from the house and asked them to wait. But the neighbors demanded that the fox be left with them to make sure that he would not deceive them. Ning replied that if they want to become friends, then they need to trust each other. In response, they said that they would help him find the necessary thing and go with him. Yi began to realize that after the beginning of a new era, their demonic side began to appear in people. While going up the stairs, the guy smelled a pungent smell, which made him think that they had already received their abilities. The young man slowly walked to his door, assuming that Liner might be in his apartment. Having entered the house in a hurry, Ning immediately closed the front door behind him. However, one of the neighbors managed to stick a crowbar through the doorway and said that this was not the way to treat friends. Yi instantly opened the door and invited them into his apartment. Daji already felt at home. His partner walked up to a shelf with a huge number of comic book figurines and asked if he was really that rich. The main character replied that he was just drawing manhwa and that it was for his work. Then he hurried into the room to get the necessary thing. He himself rushed to look for Liner, but she was nowhere to be found. The guy was at a loss. He only found a note from her, where Sue wrote her account so that he could add her as a friend. The devoted fan also did not leave any weapons in the apartment. After which he hurried to send Liner a friend request using his system. Returning to the neighbors, Ning hurried them to go to the old man for a task. But they decided to ask what ability he chose, since he was also on the demonic path. Daji, in turn, noticed that her dad actually chose divine cultivation. Such unexpected information shocked the guys, and they began to be indignant. Yi could not even imagine that the fox would harm him so much, thereby putting him in a rather deplorable situation. Ning tried his best to convince them that his pet did not know what he was talking about, and he was really on the demonic path. In response, the neighbors demanded that he prove his words, or they would take the fox for themselves. The young man understood that he had nowhere to run, and jumping down was an extremely dangerous decision. At that moment, Liner wrote to him. She asked if he was still alive. The main character sighed with relief, assuming that Sue would help him. Yi asked her to urgently teach him an attack skill, since he was attacked by 2 demonic cultivators. But at that time Tang literally flew into his window. Ning managed to cover the fox with himself. The young man, in turn, indignantly asked what she was doing here. The fat neighbor did not let her answer and handed her his phone, asking her to add him as a friend. In response, Qingzhou dealt him a rather painful blow to his impudent face. His friend immediately rushed to his aid and asked how he was feeling. The fat man said that he definitely likes this woman and is simply delighted with her. The other one intended to attack Zhou, but the guy noticed that this girl was too tough for him. Confident Qing urged them to attack together so that they would have at least some chance. Meanwhile, Yi received a message from Lin. He opened the notification panel, realizing that only he could see it. As it turned out, Air sent him a sword fighting technique, which was quite useful for him. Ning was surprised that such things could be sent through this system. Naturally, the guy instantly opened it and began to gradually study the technique of 10,000 blades. Initially, the progress was only 10%, but the potential was enormous. However, after a few seconds, the progress in mastering this technique increased to 70%. And within a moment, the first form of the 10,000 swords technique was successfully learned, which was a fairly fast method. At this moment, the fat man used the acquired praying mantis technique skill against Tang. But she didn't help him much, because Qingzhou instantly unleashed a series of attacks on him. His friends stated that he had a C-rank ability and an angry goat technique. Zhou, in turn, demonstrated her skills with her phoenix technique. Qing flew into the air and dealt a crushing blow to the naive guy. At this time, the worried Daji called out to her father and said that it was not her mother. The main character replied that he knew about it and asked her to stay behind him. Hearing Yi call her name, Tang stated that this was the same spirit fox. Ning said that he had already chosen divine cultivation, and therefore they could not be together, after which he hurried to use his learned ability on her, thousands of swords. A moment later, magical green blades rained down on the unsuspecting Zhou. As a result, this attack broke a hole in the floor, where Qing fell through. The guy noticed that it was too easy. However, after using the skill, the young man felt wildly weak in his body, and his daughter, in turn, admired her dad. Suddenly, a flame appeared from a hole in the floor and engulfed the entire apartment. Yi immediately grabbed Daji and jumped from the third floor without any problems, marking the right choice in the form of divine cultivation. Qingzhou began shouting from the balcony that he was indeed the future demon king, and she was his wife. But Ning understood that she was trying to deceive him, since he was on the divine path and could not be a demonic ruler. The guy hurried to hide. At that moment he received a new message from Liner. The girl wondered if he was alive. The young man replied that he was fine and asked where she actually was. Su stated that she was heading towards Kunlun Mountain and would eagerly wait for the myths to descend. She also attached a photo of herself. She was a pretty girl. After reading the message, Yi thought about the phrase myths will descend, because something happened a few days ago. 3 days before, Ning was calmly finishing the manhwa when the editor called him, which in turn stated that it brought some pretty good news for the author. The guy's comic was chosen by the publisher to adapt it into an anime, but the mangaka needs to add a mythological element. The young man replied that this would have a negative impact on the plot and everything would turn into a chaotic mess. Yi insisted on freedom of imagination in his creations, but the editor offered him additional payment, where with each chapter the price will increase by 15%, they will also pay separately for copyright. Naturally, the offer was more than tempting, and Ning agreed to these conditions, after which he began to think about where and how he should introduce the mythological element, since he was mainly involved with cultivators. A possible option was to transfer the main characters to the appropriate dimension. But the main character came to a different decision, to add mythological stories to the already existing world. In this connection, Yi came up with the myth that descended, and everything that was happening now followed the script of his comic book. However, this plot was invented 3 days ago and the young mangaka did not even have time to start writing it. This means that someone else painted a new era of myths. Ning wanted to ask his fan Su about this. The guy immediately wrote to Liner, asking how his comic ended and what happened at the end. The answer was shocking. Air said that his script had no end, because he died and did not have time to complete the work. The young man realized that if he had really returned home then, he would have died, but Tang called him the future king. And if he died, then how could he become a ruler and be useful to others? There were too many questions. Ning decided to ask Su if she really saved him just because she was a fan. Lin answered positively. After which he asked her another question, whether she knew about his future rule in this world, but Air did not answer him. Meanwhile, Daji got hungry, which she told the main character about. Yi understood that with the advent of the new era this was the initial problem. It was necessary to get food. However, going to the store was a bad idea, because obviously most of the people were already there, and therefore the monsters. And although there are a lot of noodles in the house, Qingzhou could still be there, and it would be dangerous to return. But the most important thing was to find the reborn Liner, who was last in his apartment, and now on Mount Kunlun. Ning suggested that Su left the city before midnight because she knew about the onset of the disaster. The guy decided to lie low on a rural farm, where there were a lot of vegetables and more or less safe. He hastened to calm his daughter down and said that he would soon find food for her. Thoughts about the descending myth did not leave him. The young man believed that the limit of combat capabilities at this time would be much greater. However, even high-ranking cultivators would have a hard time when he came to this world, because people will encounter unusual monsters and mythical creatures. This mythical world should come in 99 days, but how to live this time? On the way out of the city, the main character discovered a motorcycle and naturally used it to move quickly. Having left this crazy place, they headed to the farm. Fortunately, Ning had a spiritual fox navigator. After some time, he found abandoned apple trees, where he and Daji ate plenty. Then they came across a cow abandoned by the farmers, which the young man hastened to kill. After which the guy fried the meat, and they finally ate normally. However, over time, food became less and less, and the search for provisions promised to be eaten by demons, but there was no other way out. At that moment, they were waylaid by monsters, but with the help of their abilities, the young travelers defeated them. It is worth noting that the Thousand Blades technique is indeed an extremely effective skill. Sitting on the roof of the farm, Ning and Daji watched the battle between people and lost monsters. As evening fell, Yi visited a New Era forum, where a certain Professor Chen was giving instructions on how to survive in this world. He launched a broadcast where he described in detail the points of interest of the survivors. The professor noticed that food from the old era rots quite quickly. This rule is called the linear acceleration rate of another space. And everything that people like, mainly cars and weapons, they are in a state of accelerated aging. Metals and infrastructure all increase the amount of oxygen as the rate of evolution increases 100-fold. However, freshly prepared food does not accelerate in time, and in this regard, Chen had some pretty good advice. The new era represented a renewed old world, where everything would eventually be ousted from history. Thus, all technological progress will transfer to the cultivator civilization. Ning thought that divine cultivation would allow him to accelerate his cultivation, but this was not entirely true. After all, the main character was only at the third stage of his development. And if this dimension really was Comic E, then this stage was the beginning, and after that it was necessary to harden the body. But even with this result, the monsters could cope with a cultivator of this rank, and there was still 3 months left. At the same time, Daji's origami technique could be used as bait, then it would need to be developed. Cultivation is gradual, but in such a short time it was difficult to become a strong fighter capable of defeating demons. Ning wanted to use the author's perception to reflect on what was happening, and began to fry another portion of meat. But, despite the fact that it was not he who drew the descending myth, at that moment his thought process was interrupted by a fox. She reached for the poorly fried meat. The guy said that she should wait until it was cooked. He didn't know what to expect from technology in the era of cultivators, and whether it was possible to shoot a sword like a rocket over long distances. And will electromagnetic weapons be stronger than a normal thunder and lightning spell? The young man suggested that during these 3 months there would be a transitional period of merging civilization and cultivation. Having prepared a piece of meat, Ning decided to try it, but Daji demanded that he give it to her. He asked her to wait. Having started to explain to her that she should think not only about herself, like her dad, but the tearful girl insisted on her own. Meanwhile, an encyclopedia of monsters, including their characteristics and weaknesses, was posted on the New Era forum. People, in turn, also shared their observations and talked about how to fight certain demons. By continuing to share advice, the cultivators thereby expanded their scope of knowledge. At this time, a certain intelligence service of military advisors was trying to track down the author of this forum, a flickering red star. Yi believed that no one would be able to find him, especially since he used a pseudonym to remain incognito. Ning decided to go to Kunlun Mountain to meet with Liner, who was clearly associated with myths and knew about the descent point in the mountains. Suddenly, the inquisitive Daji asked him where they were going. The young dad replied that they were going to the mountains. Passing by a huge stone, the girl said that a monster with the head of a dog was sitting in ambush behind it. The main character noticed that after the advent of this era, more and more people with the heads of cats and dogs began to appear. However, there was no red snake with a golden eye or the turtle of heavenly life and the rest of the demons. The most interesting thing is that it was at that moment that the system notified him of the appearance of all these monsters. Suddenly Daji joyfully shouted that her mother was coming to them. The guy was dumbfounded. He saw in the distance a slender girl with an umbrella and a white robe. Her face was covered with a mask. For some unknown reason, Nina was overcome with anxiety. It seemed to him as if the whole world was about to burn, while ruthless monsters with murderous genes appeared in the world. He decided to take refuge in one of the warehouses on the outskirts of the city, where there was no one. The young man understood that even the weakest demon had extremely dangerous abilities, and he would not be able to defeat them. All that was left was to hide, but even with a freezer, there was enough food for a maximum of 3 days. The guy decided to check the forum, where there should definitely be information about new monsters. One of the reporters even published a scary photo in which huge monsters were destroying the city of Tianhe. Unexpectedly, he wrote on the forum about certain saviors, and also posted a photo of what was happening, where unknown Qi transformation level cultivators fought back against terrifying demons. Yi could not understand where they could come from, especially of such a strong rank. After all, during this time, with 100% talent for self-development, he was only able to reach the 3rd stage of cultivation. Meanwhile, on the outskirts of Tianhe City, in a mansion overlooking the lake, Tang stood on the balcony. At that moment, her subordinate flew to her on her sword, with a report on the work done and what was happening in the city. The young cultivator stated that in Tianhe she had eliminated 2 mid-level monsters, leaving only weak demons. Qingzhou replied that she was absolutely not interested in information about monsters, because no matter how many demonic altars were built, without a king they had no meaning. Zhou knew very well that it was her beloved hubby who anonymously posted instructions on the classification of monsters. She also understood that Yi was heading to Kunlun Mountain, and was probably sent by the 9 Heaven scammers. Henchwoman Qing said that ancient demons had begun to appear and she should be careful. Tang, in turn, immediately stood on her sword and rushed in search of her betrothed. At this time, the system notified the owner about the change in Tianhe to the demonic city number 14. And demonic cultivators have the ability to develop their abilities to a higher level. It remained a mystery why they, knowing about the new era, waited until the last minute. He assumed that he was being hunted. At that moment, the wall in the warehouse suddenly collapsed. The main character did not understand what happened. A moment later, a huge storm monkey stood in front of him, and Daji couldn't use the map while he was having a snack. Although the beast was not strong, it already had a hardened body. It was also extremely fast and jumping. However, at the same time, the storm monkey still had a weak spot, and that was the back of its head. Ning unleashed his 1,000-sword technique on her and hurried to escape with his daughter. Having asked the fox to look on the map to see if there were any more monsters nearby, the girl replied that there were a lot of them, adding that they had literally surrounded them. He didn't understand why the warehouse had attracted so many demons. Running out into the street, the guy discovered that angry monkeys were everywhere. The future king understood that it would be extremely difficult to survive in such a situation. Suddenly Daji went on the attack, calling on the bloodthirsty monsters to retreat. The spiritual fox literally showered them with her paper dolls using the origami technique. Having asked Ning to leave these animals to her, he was against the child confronting the demons, but the girl insisted on her own. Actively demonstrating his abilities to his father, the guy watched with surprise what was happening. The monkey, in turn, declared that it could not be overcome by some ridiculous dolls. Then she caused a storm, which swept away a huge number of Daji dolls. Calling her a stupid animal, the girl began to attack her with magical green flames. The fire literally engulfed the entire monster. The storm demon seemed at a loss. Meanwhile, the father arrived in time to help the fox, with the second blade technique. The young man noticed that this attack consumed too much energy. At that moment one of the monkeys threw a huge stone at them. Ning instantly grabbed Daji and ran to the side. Unfortunately, Su only taught him 2 magic sword techniques. At the same time, there were too many storm monsters. He did not know how he would get out of this situation. The spiritual fox shouted again that her mother had come to their aid and pointed to the young lady with the umbrella. The monkeys, in turn, stopped attacking them, as if they were afraid of the unknown girl. The stranger said that he, as a future king, should not hide in warehouses. The main character completely agreed with her, but his arsenal of skills left much to be desired. The girl said that his skills were really ineffective, and she would help him. Adding that he was not the mother of the demonic fox, the guy asked how she would help him. The young lady said that she left him a paper doll and did not know that Dodgy would be able to use it. Then she took out a small box and, opening it, called on E to eat the capsule. Ning asked what kind of pill it was that made the monkeys go crazy. The stranger replied that this is a pill of 9 changes, and he must know about it. This capsule, through mutations, changed abilities, depending on the person's talent. The main character asked her who she was. The girl called herself an ordinary alchemist. What Yi doubted, because she was able to get such a valuable 9-change pill. The young lady said that she also had to master other techniques. She stated that these monkeys were some kind of valuable material, then used her magic to destroy all the monsters. The healer noticed that the animals were at the initial stage of development, so only the claws were of little use. The mysterious stranger scared Yi more than Tang, because she even knew that he was heading to Mount Kunlun, where is really the best place for self-development, but first you need to master combat skills to protect Dodgy. And since she is an ordinary alchemist, she cannot teach a girl anything. Ning must do it. The guy asked where he should go, because demonic cultivators had captured Tianhe. The girl advised him to go to Van Town, where they might be able to help him with the necessary equipment. After which she identified herself as Bai Shui and told her account that he should invite her as a friend, adding that she would be waiting for him at Mount Kunlun. Using Dodgy's map, the young man determined the distance from Tianhe to Wang Town, which was 143 kilometers. It seemed rather strange to Yi that Bai encouraged the fox to call him daddy, while not trying to marry him. Ning did not hesitate and added Shui to his friend using the system. And then in correspondence he asked her a question whether she had been reborn. Bai answered quite ambiguously. After which the main character thought about improving his fighting skills, not understanding why Shui told him to go to Wang Town. Having found an abandoned house in the outback, Yi hurried to go inside to rest a little and take the coveted pill. The cultivator changes fate, heaven and earth, and spiritual energy flows into his body. This energy is similar to water, and to absorb more of it, a larger reservoir is needed. The effect of the golden change capsule allowed a person to become a full-fledged cultivator. Suddenly Yi began to bleed from his eyes. Thus, its characteristics have improved, and in 5 days the second change should begin, as reported by the system. In addition, Ning was able to move from the 3rd stage to the 7th stage, and his profession became dietary cultivation. The guy began to dream about the divine blade when Dodgy loudly shouted that she was hungry again. The main character noted her gluttony, but it was impossible to torture the child, because it is a growing organism. Meanwhile, 2 unlucky neighbors of Yi reached the city of Van, who began to discuss what is most important in the apocalypse. They agreed that they needed to be more ruthless and confident in their actions. Qingzhou, as it turned out, not only spared them, but also taught them demonic abilities. In exchange for carrying out a special assignment to find that same young man. At this moment, 2 daggers suddenly fell in front of them, and the freakish people gathered were scared. A moment later, an unknown young girl jumped down to them from a high-rise building, and breaking into a malicious smile, she very kindly welcomed them to Van Town. The guys instantly fell on their knees in front of her and began to apologize for the trouble. In response, the demon lady stated that they had nothing to worry about, because they were here as guests. After which she called on her sisters to come out and greet new clients. The girls immediately began to process the victims, offering them various fruits and other services. The elder decided not to be shy and tried the apple, saying that it was quite tasty. The demonic lady said that if the guys were lost, then she could become a personal guide for noble clients, asking their henchmen to take the guys into the city and show them the sights. The girls, in turn, began to say that they could do everything they could wish for in this city. At this time, following the sluggish neighbors, Yi and Dodgy came to the city of Van Town. At that moment, a certain demonic bird flew to its mistress and announced the arrival of the king. The ruler responded with relief that she had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. While the hungry fox demanded sweets from Dad, Ning wondered whether he could get the necessary equipment here. Suddenly, 2 daggers landed in front of them, and the guy backed away, assuming that these knives could very well become his weapon. The demon lady and her sisters greeted him upon his arrival in the city of Van. Yi began to think that demons had invaded the human world, but Daji was pleased with the huge amount of fruit. The friendly girl stated that they had always lived here and belonged to the demonic palace. Meanwhile, the daughter was actively eating the delicious apples offered by her sisters. The demonic lady said that in their city they can do whatever they want. Ning immediately asked if they had weapons. The girl urged him not to worry about such trifles. Then she asked them to follow her inside the city, where they would find everything they needed. Yi understood that he should be on his guard, since free cheese is only in a mousetrap, and how it will all end is unknown. The young man drew attention to the people among the demons, who looked quite happy. There was a feeling that it was safe here and more like the land of heavenly deities. A polite lady showed a store where, according to her, there were a lot of different weapons. Going inside, Ning noticed the swords, which were recently made, because the old blades were already rusty. The guy asked what the price of the swords was. The demonic lady said that it would be better for him to talk about this with the store owner, adding that he has nothing to worry about as they are running an honest and fair business. What the main character naturally doubted, because demons and honesty are not compatible things. Yi saw a huge number of blades in a large factory, and people working in the forges. At that moment, a demonic snake crawled up to him and welcomed him into his store, praising his goods. Ning said that he wanted to buy a sword. The snake replied that her store, called Qin Qin, just makes edged weapons. Then she asked what level of cultivation he was at in order to choose the best option. The young man said that he was at the initial stage. The snake hurried to go get the flying blade, which she informed him about. After some time, she brought Yi a sword in a beautiful sheath, and said that this should suit him. Ning decided to try out the blade and asked how much it cost. The snake stated that they did not need money. The extremely surprised main character asked what they wanted then. The snake, in turn, shocked him with its answer, asking for its eyes for the sword, adding that the eyes of an initial stage cultivator will be enough to acquire this weapon. The indignant young man said that he would not pay such a high price. At that moment, the phantom of a huge snake rose above the merchant, and she said that this was an adequate price. He returned the sword and refused this deal, because a blind man has no need for a blade. However, the saleswoman noticed that the moment he entered the store, trading began, and he would not leave until he paid for the sword, because this rule has been set by the Great Demon Palace for many years, and all races follow him without exception. At this time the guards approached. The demon bird immediately informed the ruler that the young master refused to pay. The Queen of Monsters understood that he was the only one who could help them, as the elders told her. In this connection, she hastened to personally greet the future king and see if he was different from the others. The young mistress stepped forward, thereby flying down to the store. She was curious how he would get out of this situation. Meanwhile, Yi's naive neighbors worked hard in the mine where the monsters had put them, and the younger brother was constantly dissatisfied with everything. The elder urged the fat man to be grateful that the demons had left them alive at all. They decided to ask Qingzhou for help, and subsequently wrote her a message. However, Tan stated that she was too busy and would take up this issue as soon as she was free. At the same time, they understood that Zhou might not come, because the task was not completed and they could not find Yi. At that moment, the guard cut off the hand of one of the miners with an axe, and everyone around him was horrified. But after that the guard thanked him for his work and said that this was the entrance fee to the nightclub, which was due to him as a reward. The guy, in turn, replied that he didn't want any clubs and just wanted to work in the mine. The brothers began to discuss this episode, because this was already the fourth time that day, which means that their turn would soon come. Thus, the demons forced them to pay for various entertainments and goods, while always smiling sweetly. The elder noticed that in fact the monsters hate people, but act as if they were friends. Therefore, they need to think about how to escape from this terrible city. Suddenly the young man called the guard and said that this fat man wanted to escape. He, in turn, was at a loss. The guard took out his axe and said that according to the rules of the demonic court, he was obliged to punish him. At this time, the elder quietly crept up behind him and dealt a strong blow to the big man. Then he called on his slow friend to immediately run away while the guard recovered from the blow. Meanwhile, the main character and his daughter were surrounded by disgruntled monsters. Daji declared that she would not let her father be offended. The snake noticed that according to the rules of their yard, a client who refuses to pay is obliged to pay triple the amount. Therefore, 2 eyes will not be enough and the liver and heart will also have to be taken. The main character was shocked by this statement, realizing that they simply wanted to kill him, but at the same time, the snake did not attack first, fearing his level of cultivation of the initial element. However, he probably won't be able to come to an agreement with the demons either, since he will simply make himself a laughing stock. There is also no point in stalling for time. There was only one way to escape, but it is necessary to show your maximum. Ning decided to verbally humiliate the demon and began to threaten the snake that he could destroy this city. However, the monster replied that he would not be able to do anything because the initial stage cultivator was too weak. Yi began to realize that there was indeed an expert-level demon in the city, and he most likely would not survive. And if you follow the plot of his comic, then there were 3 forces, a deity and a devil with monsters. It is obvious that even the demonic cows were not that crushing force, which means the city is in the hands of the Bull King. The guy decided to try to fool them again and said that in fact his cultivation level was much higher. After which the young man leaned towards Daji and whispered in her ear the further plan of action. Yi asked his daughter to take out the monster skin and show it to everyone, which they took off a couple of days ago. After rummaging a little in her overalls, the girl dumped it on the ground. The blast furnaces present were shocked to see the skin of the mysterious snake. Ning said that this monster's name is Ao, and everyone already knows the full name. The guy understood that since the demons were not united, they would not attack him, otherwise all of humanity would have died out. Monster cultivation depended on resources unlike humans, so they would not fight against a strong opponent. That's why some monsters agree to serve people and be their mounts. The demons could not believe it, because this is the name and skin of their master Ao Shu Shu, which is what they said. Yi was horrified and asked if their leader's name was really Ao, because he assumed that the ruler here was a bull. It was Shu, who suddenly announced herself, who was observing everything that was happening. The demonic lord landed near the main character and looked at him. All the monster's subordinates instantly bowed their heads in front of her and greeted her. The perplexed Ning asked who she really was. The young ruler, breaking into a smile, proudly declared that she was Ao Shu Shu. The guy was taken aback and began to remember his comic book, where Ao was the queen of the dragons, in addition to the other 7 demon kings. The young mangaka realized his miscalculation regarding the continuation of the plot, assuming that it was over. Daji began nervously tugging at Dad's pant leg and saying that their plan had failed. Shu, in turn, asked if he personally took off this skin. At that moment, Yi's eternally unlucky neighbors were running down the street like crazy, running away from the demons. The guards stated that the 2 were having fun and decided to escape from the mine where they were extracting minerals. However, the monsters surrounded them on all sides, and there was nowhere else to run. They realized that they had fallen into a trap. The main character could not understand where he saw these guys. Their faces were familiar to him. A couple of minutes later, demonic creatures tied them up and threw them at the feet of the ruler. I asked her what to do next with this waste. The poor fellows, in turn, began to beg her for mercy, saying that their families were waiting for them. Yi came closer to them. The brothers also recognized the guy and joyfully said his name. They told him the story of how Sister Tang kept them alive thanks to him. The young lady Ao was extremely surprised and asked if they really knew each other. Ning replied that they were his brothers with whom he went through many life trials. Neighbors also confirmed his words, suggesting that the guy really knows demons. The protagonist immediately seized the opportunity and demanded that the snake collect payment for his sword from them. Shu Shu gave her consent to this deal because it complies with the rules of the demonic court. The snake immediately handed Yi the treasured blade, thanking him for the excellent trade, after which she hurried the new debtors to immediately pay for their friend's goods. The elder instantly wrote to Qingzhou that Ning was actually in the city of Wang, naively counting on salvation. Ao Shu, in turn, invited the young man to make another deal, but this time with her. The ruler said that she really wanted to get this dragon skin. Meanwhile, Bai met with Tang and told her about Ye's whereabouts, adding that she should hurry up before he leaves, so as not to look for him again later. Zhou replied that if Shui lied to her, the consequences would be extremely dire for her. The alchemist convinced her otherwise, because she did not want problems with her clan, and she only needed the karmic fire of the underworld. Bai continued to talk about an equivalent exchange. Tang already wanted to give the flame she needed. However, at this moment, she received a notification from her subordinate brothers that Ning was in Wang City. In connection with this, Qing hastened to strike a lightning strike with karmic fire at Shui, accusing her of lying. She herself hurried to meet her beloved hubby in Van Town. However, Bai still managed to escape with the help of her abilities. Moreover, she got what she wanted. Noting the excessive meanness of the demonic clan, because this could be expected from Zhou. Thus, Shui received the karmic fire of the underworld and remained alive, which could not but make her happy. Bai understood that Ten already knew about the place where Yi was located, and it was impossible to stall for time. Suddenly, a bird flew to her and reported that Ning had already met with Ao. Shui, in turn, was interested in watching the battle between Qingru and Shu Shu. Meanwhile, the main character did not know what to do, because his deception had gone too far. His thoughts were interrupted, as always, by the restless Daji, who asked Dad to take a beautiful bird with him. Suddenly the young man noticed her and remembered that he had already seen her before. It was on a rock when he was fighting with the monkeys, and the bird was sitting on a tree. In addition, there was a similar feathered creature when he met Bai. He thought it was suspicious. Perhaps the Dragon Queen knew about his arrival in the city of Van, and was waiting for this meeting. It dawned on Yi that if Shu was truly expecting his arrival, then he was temporarily safe. The demonic ruler, in turn, was curious how he would get out of this situation. Unexpectedly for Ao, the guy announced that he was giving her this dragon skin. The girl was extremely surprised by his action. However, in return she should give him something of equal value, which is what Yi began to persuade her to do. After thinking a little, Ning turned to the snake and, pointing at it, said that he wanted to take it. Shu immediately changed her face and replied that in this way he was trying to make fun of their demonic race, adding that exchanging the skin for a monster is unfair trade and is unacceptable to them. Ao suggested that he choose any equipment or bulls in large quantities so that the barter would be truly fair. Watching what was happening, the protagonist's neighbors were perplexed. Daji tried to convince Dad that they needed an army of bulls, but Yi stood his ground and wanted to get the snake. Ning said that snakes are much better than bulls. Shu said that if he does not change his mind, she will be forced to kill him. The guy replied that the ruler herself left him no choice but to get the demonic snake. Ao asked why he said that this was the only choice she gave him. The young man said that she was one of the 7 kings of monsters, and volunteered to personally solve the problem with the equipment store. The surprised Lady Shu asked him what he wanted to say. Ning said that in fact she was apparently waiting for him in this city. Ao was amazed by the guy's insight and replied that she had actually been expecting him to arrive. Yi added that she must have a good reason for this, especially since his first steps in the city, she had been watching him. It can also be assumed that all this was pre-planned by her. Shu Shu noted his rather brave statement and asked him why he thought she needed all this. The guy retorted again because she wanted to test him and made him believe in some rules. After all, when he asked about the cost of the sword, they wanted to get his eyes, which, in principle, is not a reasonable price. Ao stated that demons eat people, so the price is quite reasonable and she doesn't see any problem with it. He initially thought so too, but when he saw his 2 neighbors, he realized that this was not so, which he told the mistress. After all, these guys always do everything differently than the situation requires and are not capable of anything. And if monsters really eat people, then why are they still alive, despite all their rules? Considering all of the above, people would not feel safe in this city. But if you look at the streets of Van Town now, you can see how people behave quite naturally, without feeling a sense of fear. In addition, he knows about a demonic spell among the dragon race, called a mirage, which means this is all an illusion invented by her. At this moment, Ao Shu squeezed a certain magical purple sphere in her hand. As a result, the city turned into ruins, gray clouds hung over Van, and people disappeared from the streets. The ruler was truly delighted with the guy and asked him to answer one question: why the snake was his only choice. Yi said, no matter if he wanted to buy weapons or food, this particular snake would appear in front of him. All the monsters present were stunned and could not understand how he knew about this. And he understood that even if he received a powerful weapon, with his level of development, he would not be able to unleash the true power of the sword. It turns out that the problem is not in the blade, but in the bodyguard, because the snake would not have been afraid when it recognized its strength if it had not been confident in itself. Yi guessed that she was actually also in the early stages of cultivation. Therefore, it is logical to conclude that Ao secretly assigned her to him as a guard, without him realizing it. The end result is a fairly even trade, mysterious dragon hide for an early-stage bodyguard. The dragon lady stated that his deductive method and powers of observation were simply amazing, adding that on the first day of the new era, Shui came to her and told her about the future king who would come to Wang. In exchange for information about the ruler, Bai asked for some materials for herself, and she suggested that Ao personally verify this when meeting the guy, and then give the necessary resources. Then Shu replied that if everything turns out to be a lie, then the alchemist will receive nothing. And now she realized that Shui had not deceived her, because in less than an hour the young man exposed the plan of the ruler, who had been preparing him for 10 days. She was more amazed only by his talent for cultivation, since he was already at the 8th stage, and only a week of the new era had passed. Which was also true. On the way to Van Town, Ning managed to make another breakthrough. The main character tried to remain calm so as not to become arrogant from such forced praise from the mistress of the dragons. While the poor brothers were only in the first stage of founding, they were shocked by their neighbor's result. Ao concluded that his extraordinary wisdom and talent will help him become a real king in the future. And with the fact that the snake was his gift, the young man also guessed. Shu called on Shao Qing to show her abilities. The snake crawled up to Yi and said that this flying sword actually belonged to her because she made a blood contract with him. Naturally, Ning did not object and gave her the blade, which instantly flew into the air. Snake Qing, in turn, immediately climbed onto him and demonstrated her skills. The young man realized that she was indeed at the stage of the initial element, after which Shu noted that from now on Shao will be his servant and bodyguard, adding that she is very strong and is by no means at the initial stage of cultivation. A moment later, the snake turned into a rather slender and pretty girl. This literally shocked both her new owner and her brothers. Qing could transform into anything. At that moment, Shao pointed 2 swords at Ye's neighbors and threatened them with violence. The brothers, in turn, immediately began to apologize for their behavior. Ning, in turn, asked her not to kill them. Then the snake approached the spiritual fox and stroked her head extremely carefully. As a result, the girl suddenly acquired an absolutely human appearance, without a tail and fox ears. The young master realized that this was truly a gift for him, because a demonic snake with illusion skills was an extremely useful monster. Ao noticed that in addition to Qing, the demonic court had prepared 3 items for Yi to show their sincerity. 3 cows immediately brought boxes of different sizes. Shu asked Nina to accept these gifts. The young man was pleasantly surprised. The first gift turned out to be a flying sword made from high-quality mysterious crystalline iron. The guy understood that if this blade was from his comic book, then it was even better than Zhao's sword. The second gift was boots made from the feathers of golden eagles, with which he would be able to fly. The main character was delighted with such shoes, because in a world filled with monsters, it was necessary to move quickly. The third gift was a mirror for protecting the heart. It will allow the owner to maintain balance. The mirror can also block 3 critical attacks, but only those not exceeding the power of the initial element. Yi compared it to a computer game where he had 3 whole lives. However, if the blow is stronger than the initial stage, the mirror will explode, which is what its ruler warned about. Ning put on all the equipment and asked what she wanted in return, because it was probably not free. The Dragon Queen replied that this was indeed the case and there was a certain condition, but it will need to be completed later, when the future king becomes much stronger, and besides, it is not difficult. Yi thanked Ao Shu for the gifts and noted that this was fair trade. At that moment, his ridiculous neighbors approached him and asked to be his partners, sucking up in every possible way. Qing reacted instantly and struck the fat man, who flew to the side. Shao threateningly declared that he had no right to touch or talk to her master. Ning knew that they were cultivators of the demonic path and could be up to something bad. Suddenly the fat man fell to his knees in front of the Dragon Queen, holding a knife behind his back. The main character immediately shouted to Ao, trying to warn her. Within a couple of seconds, the younger brother rushed at her with a knife, intending to kill her. However, Shu was much faster and attacked him first. The fat man backed away. The lady was surprised that he didn't even fall. At that time, a second cultivator crept up behind her. Ao immediately turned around, not understanding how he managed to approach her unnoticed. after which she turned into a huge dragon. Everyone literally froze in place. Then the enraged Shu Shu hurried to attack the two naive people, declaring that they did not dare attack her from behind. Ning was shocked by the size of one of the 7 queens, and noted her power. Suddenly, chains flew towards the dragon ruler and tied her up. A second later, a huge number of chains bound most of the demons. Ao shouted furiously that this was the 9 inferior soul array of the demon clan. The snake could not understand how these two scum could know about this spell. He noticed that this was not their skill. Suddenly Daji pointed upward, where an unknown person was standing at the top of the building. The guy began to carefully peer at the silhouette and assumed that it was Tan. Shu Shu, bound in chains, asked her who she was that she dared to use this technique. Bai watched what was happening. She understood that Qingzhou was serious and wanted to take the young man. Shui liked what was happening. The alchemist prepared to watch the performance. The spiritual fox said that this was the same demon lady. He could not understand how Zhou got here. Joyful Tan shouted to him that she was really looking forward to their meeting, because she had been looking for him for so long. Qingzhou was extremely upset by the fact that he had a demon on the side, which she reported to Ninggu. The named wife said that when she kills everyone, he will definitely return to her. Seeing Zhou standing on the flying sword, the guy realized that she was also a starting element cultivator. Meanwhile, the Dragon Queen said threateningly that the 9 lower souls array would not be able to hold her for long. The demons began to tell Ao in choked voices that the chain was too tight. The chains, in turn, did their job, and the army of bulls died, as if the souls began to be drawn out of them. Shui at that moment realized what the insidious Qingzhou was really up to. After all, the array was used to purify souls, so Tang absorbed the energy of the bulls and thereby nourished herself. However, if Ao does not kill her guards, she will not get out of the array, but by destroying them, she will give Zhou a lot of strength. It is worth noting that this was a perfect plan on Qing's part. The Dragon Queen still tried to break out, while Tang continued to provoke her, urging her to kill her bulls. Shu Shu suddenly took on human form, declaring that she still couldn't defeat her. However, at this time the ruler was again bound by many chains. Ao transformed into a huge dragon again, trying to break out of the mass. Xiao, in turn, could not stand it and flew to the aid of her mistress. The main character tried to dissuade her, since this was clearly another trick on Zhou's part. But Qing had already managed to approach Shu Shu, who was also against the snake helping her. After all, in this way the future king was left without protection. Tan instantly rushed to him. At that moment, a paper doll flew into her. Qingzhou realized that this combat origami technique belonged to Bai. Shui realized that she had been exposed and from now on, trading with the demonic clan would be extremely difficult. The young master was shocked by Zhou's strength, because even Ao was suitable for her trap. Yi instantly grabbed Daji and rushed to flee from the distraught Tang, realizing that until he became stronger, he would have to retreat. Qingzhou was surprised at Nina's speed and noticed his boots. The demonic wife urged him to stop immediately, but the guy had a different opinion. Then Zhou used her next ability called teleport, and a moment later she found herself right in front of the main character. The young man was at a loss. Yi began to say that he used 1,000 swords that time because he thought she wanted to kill him. In response, Tan stated that she was not going to do this, but on the contrary, but Ning did not believe her and lied, she just wants to use him. Suddenly, Qingzhou approached him and kissed him. Daji was shocked by this turn of events. As it turned out, this was the future king's first kiss. Yi could not resist. After a few seconds, Zhou unstuck from him. Black blood poured from her mouth. Ning asked what it was. The demonic wife spoke, then she gave him the essence of her blood. Suddenly he was overcome with heat. The guy literally shone with some kind of purple magic. After which he began to lose consciousness. His worried daughter did not understand what was happening to him. Tang said that now he will fall into a dream, where he will see the true truth, because its essence has mental spiritual energy. At this moment, Xiao came to the rescue and immediately attacked Qingzhou. Zhou collapsed to the ground and said that she had finally achieved her goal. Bai, who was watching what was happening, was also surprised by the action of the demonic monster in the person of Tang. Qingzhou continued to repeat that he was the future king, and she was his wife, and would not let her betrothed go so easily. He tried to understand whether she was telling the truth. At that moment his vision became blurred and he lost consciousness. Ning seemed to be falling into an abyss, his body still burning from the inside. The system informed the owner about the activation of the second change, thanks to the golden pill, which definitely helped him absorb the Tang blood essence, and a moment later the change was completed. The main character's attributes also increased dramatically, and he also entered the first stage of a hardened body. Suddenly the guy heard the voice of Zhou, who was glad that he had already woken up. Tang noticed that she used half of her cultivation and created blood essence, and from now on he is on the demonic path, adding that if it weren't for his stubbornness, because of which she spent so much effort, resources and time, everything would have happened even earlier. However, the status window stated that he was still at the divine stage. Looking around, the young man did not understand where he was and asked her what kind of place it was. Qingzhou replied that this is the space of her consciousness and now he can ask her any questions. He said quite confidently so that he would not ask, she would lie to him in any case. But Tang insisted that she could not lie to him since he was her husband and was on the demonic path. Ning wanted to get valuable information from her, especially since Zhou didn't know that he actually still had divine cultivation. The guy bombarded her with questions, trying to find out about the plans of the demons in the city of Tianhe, and what the descended myth is. Qingru replied that demons develop their level much faster than divine cultivators and asked what his choice was. The young master did not understand what exactly she was talking about and decided to clarify with her. But his wife avoided answering and said that he should initially thoroughly study this world in order to make his choice. Tang decided to lift the veil for him and showed him the events that took place on the eve of the new era, where some high-ranking people held a meeting about the disaster that happened. Suddenly, Yang Qing joined them. He was the deputy director of Jiang City, Special Affairs Department, which stated that the senior management made the decision after considering the strengths and weaknesses of the two cultivation paths. Cheng said that the leadership chose the demonic cultivation path. The advisors were shocked by this decision, because it is evil, and therefore asked why they came to this conclusion. Yang replied that good and evil are determined by man, and the leadership is doing everything to reverse the situation and save people. And since the demonic type of cultivation is the fastest, it is the one that should be chosen in order to reduce mortality. Cheng also stated that they all need to accept the demonic path of development, and will go to protect cities and citizens. In one of those present, Yi recognized the girl who had recently destroyed the initial element monster in Tianhe. Tan, in turn, noticed that cultivators like her protect the world from evil spirits, adding that this is why Ning created an anonymous channel where he sends information about demons to also reduce the mortality rate. The main character was completely confused and did not know whether to believe in this version. After all, if everything is really as Qingzhou says, then Liner is lying to him. However, the Department for Special Cases has not yet released any information about the choice of either side. Still, Yi was more inclined to believe that Tang was lying to him, since she sacrificed half of her cultivation to lure him into a trap. Zhou, in turn, continued to persuade him to take her side and supposedly protect the world. Moreover, in a short period of time, he will be able to become a high-class cultivator. Qingzhou did not lose hope of seducing Ning, using her feminine manipulation tricks. She constantly leaned against the guy, trying in every possible way to gain his favor, but the young man pulled himself together. The future king pushed Tang away from him and said that she could not fool him, and besides, she did not tell about the myth that had descended. Zhou said rather sadly that they apparently communicated with him, adding that he had already become a demonic cultivator and was obliged to lead her cult, and the descended myth should be known to him. The young master asked her what would happen after this very myth, and whether she was actually reborn. Qingzhou replied that this is the greatest opportunity for all mankind. The main character was shocked, because this meant that one day God would appear among people. Tang noted that Mount Kunlun is the source of all myths. Indeed, in the ancient era, before the appearance of people, the gods actually dominated this world. And it was the gods who created this descended myth for people, giving them the opportunity to live and teaching them to survive. They created man for only one purpose, to enslave him and devour him as food. In those days, people constantly made mistakes, destroying the weapons of the gods, thereby angering the masters, and therefore they gave reason and wisdom. And after people grew wiser, they renounced the gods, ceasing to serve them, and subsequently a war began between them. And when the people finally defeated them in a fierce battle, they sealed the gods on Mount Kunlun. He noted a rather creative approach to his comic, which he definitely liked. Ning understood that the gods would descend into this world, but why did Tang say about the rise of humanity? Because this is a disaster, which is what he asked her about. Zhou replied that the power of a god is inherited, and if he falls, a new one will be born, just as the sun replaces the moon. The main character asked if she really wanted to kill God. Qingzhou stated that if the gods are not killed, then people will become their food again, so they must be eliminated, to finally inherit their power and become the new spirit of God, and only in this way can the world be protected. However, the gods are extremely strong, so it is necessary to gain unprecedented power in the shortest possible time. After which Tang again tried to lure the young master to her side, assuring him that she would help him become stronger. After all, this is inevitable, in the future he will become a king, and she will become his queen and loving wife. He said that anyone in his place could not refuse this offer, especially when such a beauty like her asks for it. But since the gods are indeed sealed in Kunlun Mountain, they need to go there immediately. Zhou, in turn, insisted on going to her cult, where they would engage in paired cultivation and become stronger. Since he was too weak at the moment, Ning asked what level of cultivation should be enough. Qingzhou said that to do this, he needed to go to the initial stage of the element, and therefore he needed her. At this moment, the guy stated that he was at the seasoned body stage. Tang was shocked. Having said that it took her 18 years for this, and he could not achieve such a result, the young man caught her, because Zhou said that she was reborn the day before the onset of a new era. Meanwhile, in Wang City, where his physical body was located, Xiao discovered that he would soon break through to a new level. Bai was surprised, because with the help of Qingrou's blood essence, he not only was not harmed, but also broke through to the next stage of development. Thus, the chains of the array were weakened, and the Dragon Queen decided to take this chance. A moment later, Ao Shu broke the chains and finally broke free. Turning around, she saw Ning lying on the ground, and realizing that these two forces are intertwined, she called on Xiao to take Daji away. Qing instantly picked up the spiritual fox and ran to the side. At this time, the main character rose above the ground, after which an explosion occurred. After a couple of minutes, the fog cleared, and having come to his senses, Yi asked what happened and where he was. Looking around, Ning saw the Dragon Queen and Xiao with Daji in her arms. He suddenly realized that he had woken up in Van City, hence leaving Tang space. Zhou, who was lying on the ground, guessed that the guy had indeed reached the stage of a hardened body. At that moment, his blade flew straight into his hand, and the young master looked at his sword with delight. It was incomparable to the foundation stage. He literally felt his power. Shu Shu and Qing were also at a loss, because he had only recently reached the 7th stage. Shui believed that the golden change pill had this effect, because such a quick breakthrough was impossible. Or the essence of Qingzhou's blood contributed to this. Bai immediately began to write to Su. The alchemist notified Lin about the sudden breakthrough of the future king to the stage of a hardened body and asked for money for her efforts. However, Air refused her. Shui was furious and continued to insist on her own. Having written that she needed the technique of paired cultivation in electronic form, Su began to increase her worth. But since Bai had no sense of pride, she began to tearfully beg Lin. Then Air set a condition for her. Shui was obliged to bring the author of the manga to the city of Ran. Naturally, the alchemist agreed and received the treasured technique, after which the healer took out a magic choker and decided to take part in the performance. At this time, the demons grabbed Qingzhou and called on the ruler to kill her. Yi saw that Tang was really injured. Even though they were on different sides, Zhou still did not kill him. At this moment, freakish demonic cultivators came to her aid. But the monsters, in turn, instantly rebuffed them, advising them to get away, otherwise death awaited them. Suddenly Bai appeared on the horizon, and noticed that they were apparently planning a rather fun party. The Lady of the Dragons asked her if she really wanted to protect Tan. Daji again called her mom and ran up to her. Shui said that she was not going to save her, but the myth would soon descend and Ao should know the consequences by killing Zhou. Shu Shu confidently stated that the demonic court is not afraid of monster cult. The healer noticed that Qingzhou has some kind of relationship with Yi, and she should not harm the future king. Therefore, she will help her in this situation, but the queen will be indebted to her. Then she took Daji and gave the girl to Ao. The indignant Shu said that she had not done anything yet, but was already talking about some kind of debt. Tang asked Shui to help her escape, because these demons would not be able to kill her anyway. Bai agreed with her, but if Zhou really ran away, the price would be too high, especially in this state, adding that she has a way to solve this problem and let her stay with Ning. Naturally, Qing Zhou agreed to her conditions. The healer noted that the demon cult would be in her debt. The young master realized that she was planning something bad. Shui, in turn, congratulated him on breaking through to the hardened body stage. Yi said that she had probably been watching what was happening for a long time and had orchestrated the situation in the warehouse. Bai said that she specially sent the monkeys to gain trust. The guy thought she wanted to kill him, which is what he said. But the alchemist noticed that if it weren't for the monkeys, he would not have eaten the pill and would not have come to this city. Ning began to understand how cunning she was. Shui decided to give the main character a gift, saying that he should remember her kindness. The young author did not understand what he was talking about. The girl immediately opened the system panel. Where Yi saw the paired cultivation technique, the young man was at a loss. Bai suggested that the future ruler should cultivate together with Tang, because he definitely liked her. However, Ning replied that in such things he relied only on himself, especially since he would not be able to tame Zhou. Shui showed the guy a prison collar that could temporarily seal a person's cultivation to solve this problem. But at the same time, he must voluntarily agree. The young master understood that no one would agree to this. The healer said that this is only possible if someone is willing to pay a certain price to be with her husband. After which Bai approached Tan and noted that it was only for a short period of time, and besides, a little later she would be able to remove it, adding that she may not believe her, but this is the only way she can stay with Yi. Qingru still agreed to wear a choker and told Shui that if she was deceiving her, then she would be in trouble, after which the healer put a prison collar on Zhou's neck. This action was accompanied by some kind of magic. Then a satisfied Bai turned to the main character and said that now he can do whatever he wants with Tang. Nin thought this was familiar. Once the queen crowned a man with the condition that her head would be clear of dirty thoughts. Shui urged the guy to take him to Qingzhou city with her, since she is an official. The young master assumed that Zhou was indeed from high society. Bai also asked Yi to visit Ran city, where she said she left a gift related to the 9 heavens. Ao, in turn, was pleased that from now on Tang was limited in strength, but did not know what to do with her unlucky minions. Naturally, the cultivators once again began to beg for mercy, saying that they would repay kindness in the next life. However, Shui said that they could do it right now, and a moment later, magical flames enveloped her body. Bai said that with the advent of the new era, transportation has fallen into disrepair, and the government will take a long time to restore production. While the weak walk, and the strong fly on their swords, this is energy-consuming. Therefore, it is necessary to harness the cart with ordinary horses, which is a very good option. Shu asked where they could get horses. The healer called on Shao to transform these scum with the help of an illusion. Naturally, this option suited everyone except the cultivators themselves. Qing took great pleasure in turning them into 2 gallant stallions. However, it was also necessary to come up with a crew, which meant staying another night in the city. The Dragon Queen ordered her minions to serve the guests immediately, and after a while, they all had dinner together at a table with plenty of food. The main character noted the excessive enthusiasm of the demons, but for unknown reasons he was still anxious. Although Ao Shu looks quite generous, she probably won't let Tang go so easily. At the same time, Shui was also extremely dangerous, but as an alchemist, the guy could not sense her. Bai smiled sweetly at him and wished him good work tonight, clearly hinting at paired cultivation with Zhou. Yi could not understand what exactly she was up to, because the healer could have driven Qingzhou away, but instead tied him to him. Storm monkeys in the warehouse, then the city of Van, everything seems to be unrelated to her, but in fact it is because of her. He could only guess what awaited him in the city of Ran, and the suspiciously calm Tan, because her power was sealed. Suddenly, Zhou asked Shui for another collar, since this one was supposedly pressing on her, but Bai said that this one was the best. At that moment, Daji approached Nin and said that she really wanted to sleep. However, the ruler of the dragons showed a desire to personally put the girl to bed. And even if this place looked peaceful, anxiety in turn did not leave the young master. Meanwhile, Shao approached him and asked him to follow her to show her the rest room. Entering the room, the guy sat down on the bed and decided to find out what the pretender heir was doing. Yi wrote her a message asking about the situation in the city of Ran. Lin replied that she was there. This gave him the definite idea that Su and Shui might know each other. Ning asked if she knew any alchemists. Heir stated that she had no such acquaintances, after which the young man spoke about his breakthrough, and asked for a new technique. Lin instantly sent him new one-handed sword skills. The main character immediately began to cultivate in order to master these abilities. The first skill of 10,000 swords in the fist style was quite strong. The second technique increased the speed of strikes in the style of an external deity. The third ability increased the power of the blow, concentrating all the force in one place, and was in the style of sharpening water stone. Yi understood that Liner could have lied to him, as well as about her rebirth with Tang. Since the distance between Van and Ran City was enormous, Ning could well have time to move to the next stage of development. In addition, it is possible that some obstacle could await him on the way to Ran, and perhaps he needs to change the route. Suddenly someone knocked on his door. The future ruler was at a loss. Then he got out of bed and said that the door was open, calling for an unknown guest to enter. A moment later, Zhou stood on the threshold of his room, asking him to lend her the paired cultivation technique. The main character thought about pair cultivation with Qingzhou, then began to convince himself that this was wrong, since he understood that in this case she would find out about his choice of the divine path. Yi asked her if she really wanted to start cultivating together. After all, she was wounded quite recently, especially in such a weakened state. However, Tan showed with all her appearance that she was ready for this, but Ning had a different opinion. Zhou finally agreed to work together later, saying that they would still have plenty of time to do so. After which Ning went to bed. Qingzhou lay down next to her and thought that he was next to her. Qing, in turn, wrote to Yang that soon the future king would be in the city of Ran, and they needed to prepare everything. The next day, the Dragon Queen asked her subordinate if they slept together. The girl answered positively. Ao noticed that Tang was trying too hard for her lord, and was even ready to give all of herself. At the same time, Shu Shu herself did not want to remain on the sidelines and asked Xiao to be extremely respectful towards Yi. Daji also underwent an awakening ritual, and she needed to rest for several days after it. After some time, Qing informed the master that his daughter accidentally ate sleeping pills. The snake apologized to the master, saying that the girl would sleep for a few days and everything would work out. Ning understood that in fact, even arsenic wouldn't harm a spiritual fox, so there really wasn't much of a problem. The guy asked why the alchemist didn't help her. Shui knows how to treat such things. Xiao stated that Bai had left a long time ago and asked the future king not to rush into pear cultivation. After which they packed their things and went by cart to Ran. Everything seemed to be getting better. However, at the same time, the main character still felt uneasy, as if he had missed something. On the way to the city, they met people who confronted the monster. People, in turn, were extremely surprised to see a cart with horses. Yi thought about the destroyed monetary system, and the government had not yet issued another currency, so everyone used barter. Ning asked Xiao if there were other cities along the way. Qing replied that Xing County was ahead and they could stop there. Even though Tang's power was sealed, it was still a threat and could contact someone. Therefore, the young master decided to visit Xing County. He hit her. As a result, Zhou lost consciousness. The area was calm and there were no monsters, and even guards stood at the main gate. There was a complete impression that this was a safe place for people. The young man asked Qing if there were any initial element cultivators in this estate. Xiao replied that there were very few of them here. Yi, in turn, began to feel like a powerful warrior among the local people. Driving around the district, Ning noticed that there was order and cleanliness, and no one rushed onto the cart. Suddenly the guy recognized his director in the old man and could not understand what he was doing here. In fact, the young master was an orphan and grew up in an orphanage called Radiance. The main character began to remember how, as a child, he drew a cat on the ground with a stick and his grandfather, the director, approached him. He wasn't that old back then, and he always liked Yi's drawings. One day he gave him pencils and said that a good artist should have the appropriate supplies. Unexpectedly for the old man, Ning called out to him, and the grandfather turned around. Initially, he did not understand who it was, but a moment later the old man had an epiphany, and the director called the guy by name. The future ruler jumped off the cart and asked what grandfather was doing here. The old man said that after the advent of a new era, he ended up here. However, Yi did not understand how the director traveled such a huge distance, because from Yu City to Xing County are hundreds of miles. The young man asked if grandfather needed food or any things. The old man urged him not to talk about these topics here and invited him to his home, where they could discuss everything. The guy understood that he couldn't stay for long, since Tan was sleeping in the cart. He himself asked Xiao to come up with a way for Qingzhou to sleep for at least another day. On the way home to the director, his grandfather advised him not to use the cart, as it was too flashy. After which the old man, at the sight of the guards, abruptly stepped aside and hid his face. He did not understand what was happening. And why is he so afraid of the garrison soldiers? Meanwhile, they approached the director's house. Entering his yard, he was joyfully greeted by children who ran up to their grandfather. The old man hurried to give them several pancakes. The children were extremely grateful to him. Ning was surprised that in such a difficult time the director continued to take care of the orphans, and asked Qing to bring fruit. The children literally surrounded Xiao, pulling apples and pears out of her box. Grandfather was surprised and asked the guy where he got so many fruits, because with the advent of the new era they were in short supply. The young master said that they were given to him as a gift. At that moment the guards were watching them. One of them shouted that they were caught stealing, as these products were stolen, adding that the bag of flour and toys were also most likely stolen. The old man said that the store was closed and so he borrowed them. The soldier began to threaten with an order from Inspector Qin to steal the property, adding that he respects Khan, but stealing is prohibited by law, and if this goes on, the monsters will destroy their district. The main character understood perfectly well that his grandfather had no choice, and he began to steal to feed the orphans. He stood up for the old man and said that he would pay for the theft. Besides, the director did this for the poor kids. The guard asked who he was. Ning proudly identified himself as the one whom Ken had raised in his time. At that moment, another soldier asked the young man if he had brought fruit on his cart. The master answered positively. The elder stated that they needed to go with them for further proceedings with the inspector. The old man asked Yi for forgiveness for causing him trouble. Ning hurried to reassure his grandfather, after which he ordered Xiao to watch the cart, and he would come soon. But Qing assured him that she had cast a spell and no one would come near her. The main character agreed, asking her to be extremely careful and not do anything without his instructions. At this time, the children approached the cart, and the horses responded by trying to drive them away. The orphans were surprised by the talking horses and only became more interested in them. Suddenly Yi saw crowds of people running away and asked what was happening. The soldier replied that monsters had been spotted near the city, adding that this happens almost every 3 days, but there is nothing to worry about until the first level alarm is declared. Ning asked in what cases such an alarm is used. The soldier said that when leviathans attack, but this happens rarely. At that moment, the first level alarm sounded throughout the entire district. The soldiers were in shock. The main character was at a loss, because they had only just talked about it, and then they declared a state of emergency. The senior guard instantly ordered the others to gather everyone in the fortress. He also demanded that the director, Xiao, and Yi follow him to the shelter. After some time, they all approached a huge fortress with a large number of military men. Ning noticed the impressive size of the cannons protruding from the building. The soldier noticed that in total they were able to place 6 guns on each tower. After which he hurried everyone inside. He told the guy that he understood his influence, because he had a cart and servants. Inside, the fortress looked more like a factory. Suddenly Yi saw people wearing specific armor and asked the military man about it. The elder noted that only cultivators of the Qi purification level and above can wear it, since there is not enough of it for everyone. Ning also noticed through the glazing something similar to an obelisk and asked what it was. The soldier said that this is a tower that generates huge flows of energy, adding that Director Kong is still obliged to be punished despite the current situation. But if the young master helps them fight off the Leviathans, then they will contribute to the resolution of this incident. At this time, Inspector Ding Fu approached them, and the officer from the Lin division of the Jiang headquarters saluted him. Ding asked what happened. The soldier told him about what happened. Yi thought maybe Inspector Qin was here. Fu then asked Ning to reveal his cultivation level to help Kong, advising him not to lie, since more than 20,000 people's lives are at stake. The future ruler understood that in addition to the Leviathan, there were several hundred other dangerous monsters. Therefore, he is obliged to help those in need, and besides, Shao is with him, and there is no need to worry about safety. However, the master decided to cheat a little and declared that he had reached the stage of chi purification. The military officers were perplexed. Ding noticed that he was much stronger than he seemed at first glance. Suddenly, a soldier hurried to them with a report and said that a Leviathan had appeared near the city of Hong, and Counselor Jan sent soldiers there. Also, reinforcements will only be able to come to the rescue tomorrow. Lin notified Ding about the shortage of ammunition, but it was necessary to hold the line. Fu himself understood that 3,000 soldiers could not cope with so many monsters. The officer said that it was necessary to defend from the towers. In this way they would raise the morale of the soldiers. At the same time, it was necessary to convince the soldiers that reinforcements had already arrived. Suddenly, one thought came to Ding. He asked Yi to appear before everyone in the guise of a military advisor, so that the soldiers would believe that they had come to their aid, adding that he will report this to the commander-in-chief later and explain everything to them, but now he needs to save people. Old Man Can, in turn, also began to persuade Ning to help them, because only he is their last hope. Naturally, the main character agreed, as he realized the seriousness of the situation. Ding was sincerely grateful to him and said that everyone in the district was indebted to him. Then he ordered Lin to bring the uniform of a high-ranking officer for the guy. After some time, Yi was dressed in a commander's uniform. Even Qing appreciated his new role and said that he had become more courageous. Then the entire Jiang division came under his leadership, thus Ning became a military advisor. Ding immediately gathered all the soldiers and declared that the army had not abandoned them during the crisis. Fu quite convincingly urged the soldiers to protect the district and its inhabitants by destroying monsters. One could only envy the inspector's oratorical skills, because he really raised the morale of the soldiers. Shao said that the demons were already on the way and therefore she needed to get ready. The newly appointed advisor understood that even if they didn't succeed, with the help of Qing's skills they would be able to escape in time. Ding said that the Leviathans are too strong, and therefore they cannot rely only on the towers. The best strategy is to lure the monsters into an ambush, and the cannons can only fire at long distances. However, at the same time, Fu said that in the future they also need to train soldiers in the skills of the new era. The guy asked what he was talking about. The inspector replied that there are certain magic circles that increase the physical strength of warriors at the expense of spiritual energy. There is even a spell that absorbs the blood and chi of demons to replenish the energy of the fighters. This was comparable to the array Tang had used in Wang's city against the Dragon Queen. Shao noticed that they specialize in strengthening the body, but Bai can use similar circles. Meanwhile, Fu was informed that the 1st Battalion was unable to stop the monsters. Ding ordered the wounded to be taken away and the rear forces to be deployed, saying that if they could use a magic circle, half of the soldiers' injuries could be avoided. At that moment, a lower Leviathan appeared on the horizon in the form of a scorpion, which had incredible speed. The inspector noted that the scorpion could burrow in the sand and get under the tower, but why it had not done this yet was not clear. Suddenly they opened fire on him from all possible weapons, but the artillery could not penetrate its shell. Fu stated that the monster was blocking the entrance to the fortress, thereby preventing the wounded from returning. Ding ordered immediate killing at any cost, as otherwise 2 battalions of soldiers would die. However, at this time another similar scorpion dug out of the ground, which significantly complicated the task. The inspector was desperate, because the second red-eyed scorpion would be able to block the entrance to the tower, even if they killed the first. Unexpectedly, the main character volunteered to help and declared that he would take on the second Leviathan. Fu reminded Yi that he needed to simply drive the scorpion away from the exit, and not try to kill it. Ning advised him to concentrate the blows between the 2nd and 3rd scales of the scorpion, since the nervous system is located there. Surprised, Ding asked if the young man had really met Leviathans before. The master pretended to simply assume, after which everyone rushed into a fierce battle against the brutal monsters. The guy, in turn, ordered Shao to stay close to him and guard him. He could not fly on a sword, because he had not reached the stage of the initial element, but with the help of boots, the master seemed to float above the ground. Then the brave Yi, together with Qing, began to complete the difficult task and drive the scorpion away from the entrance to the fortress. The soldiers only talked about how the military advisor who had come to their aid was soaring in the skies. Ning rushed to attack the scorpion with the help of his new abilities, and besides, his blade was not yet sprinkled with blood. The main character was surprised that one blow was not enough to kill the demon. Therefore, he hastened to unleash a series of lightning-fast and crushing blows on him. The soldiers were amazed by the strength of the military advisor, because he was able to destroy the scorpion with 2 attacks. The inspector, in turn, took part in the fighting along with the officers, urging them to fight between the second and third scales. One of the fighters informed Ding that the other red-eyed scorpion was already dead. A moment later, he destroyed the second Leviathan, and Fu was amazed by its power. Ning said that now the road to the fortress is clear, and the wounded can return to the tower. Then they hastened to deal with the remaining monsters, in the form of wolves. However, at this time, a purple main-stage scorpion appeared that could emit poisonous gas. Qing noticed that this silver-toothed Leviathan was very badly injured, and he is looking for food to heal his wounds, which is why he attacked Xing County. Xiao wanted to kill him, but the problem is that as soon as he senses danger, the scorpion will hide in the sand. At that moment, Fu approached them and stated that he ordered the troops to retreat and open fire at one point. Yi said that he could get close to him and destroy him. Ding tried his best to dissuade him, but Ning assured him that everything would be fine and that he would not attack, not being sure of a successful result, adding that now is not the time to argue, as the Leviathan may gain strength and release poisonous gas. Qing urged the master to hit where it hurt while she tried to block his attacks, after which Xiao ordered all the soldiers to retreat, and she would cover the rest. The wars, in turn, did not want to obey the girl, much less count on her protection. But the snake said that he and the advisor would deal with the purple scorpion themselves, and they should kill weaker monsters. However, after a couple of minutes, the Leviathan caused significant damage to her. Qing understood that she could not die now. Naturally, a demon of this level realized that they were trying to deceive him, and would not allow himself to be offended so easily. He called on the snake to retreat. But the stubborn Xiao refused to carry out this order, saying that it was too dangerous. Meanwhile, the purple scorpion suddenly jumped into the air. Ning said that this was a great chance to kill him. Qing prepared to attack the monster. The main character, in turn, hurried to strike the Leviathan in his wound, using the first sword technique. So he literally made a hole in the scorpion, after which the snake flew into it. The perplexed soldiers did not understand how the military advisor was still confronting a demon of this level. Inspector Ding also did not understand Ye's actions and gave extremely useful advice. But Ning did not listen to anyone and was extremely concentrated on his attacks. Suddenly the demon collapsed. The stunned warriors assumed that the military advisor had indeed defeated him. In this regard, they were immensely happy and congratulated the young master on his victory. And since the rest of the monsters lost their leader, they simply fled in different directions. A couple of minutes later, Xiao crawled out of the dead scorpion, having collected quite valuable materials from it. The guy praised her. Director Kong was also amazed by Ye's strength. One of the officers commented that he definitely needed to stay in the army. He added that the old man should finish the rest, and then left him alone. The soldiers still could not believe that they had won and the demons had retreated. Meanwhile, the inspector was informed that 189 soldiers were dead, and 247 were seriously wounded. Then Ding came out to his brothers and said that this was their most triumphant victory, but at the same time they lost many people. In connection with this, a memorial ceremony began in honor of the fallen soldiers. Ning understood that this was just a small district and there were so many fallen in battle, but in the city there would be many more of them. Fu thanked the guy for the work he had done and asked if he had checked the corpses of the Leviathans, adding that the problem with Director Kan has been resolved. He will also report to his superiors about the young man's feat. Ding encouraged everyone to celebrate their victory over the monsters, even though they were running out of supplies. But he said that he needed to leave the district. The inspector asked to do this after the celebration. The old man also asked Ning not to leave, because they had not seen each other for so long. Finally the guy agreed. After a certain time, they organized a festive banquet for the entire garrison. Suddenly a soldier approached the inspector and said that people from the advisor's regiment had arrived. The perplexed warriors said that the advisor sent by the leadership was already here. They assumed that another advisor had come to reward Yi for killing the main stage Leviathan. The main character became nervous, but Ding assured him that everything would be fine and nothing would happen. A couple of minutes later, the Special Military Advisory Regiment led by Zhang Tianji was already at the banquet. Fu, in turn, met them, introducing himself as the inspector of the garrison of Xing County. Zhang stated that he had heard about their feat and the advisor who had arrived, but his identity had not been established. Tianji asked if Ding had taken care of this. The inspector replied that they did not have time for this. Then a high-ranking officer asked the young man if he was the same advisor. The guy replied that he was not. Shocked, Zhang said, "It turns out that he was pretending to be him all this time." Yi said that Ding asked him to do this to boost the soldiers' morale since the situation was critical. Tianyi, in turn, was furious, realizing that this was in fact a deception. Then he asked Fu if this young man was telling the truth, but the inspector replied that he did not know about it and was hearing it for the first time. The main character was literally taken aback, because Ding himself proposed this plan, and now he's pretending. Ultimately, Ning realized that this was actually a setup in advance. And it is quite possible that even Grandfather Khan was part of this insidious plan. Xiao stated that the inspector himself asked him for help and gave him a uniform, and besides, Chief Tang heard everything. The young master whispered something in the ear of Qing, who did not want to leave him in trouble. But the guy said that he would be fine and she shouldn't worry about him, after which the snake ran away. Then he turned to Zhang and asked what his punishment would be for pretending to be a military advisor. Tianji said quite confidently that in accordance with their rules, he would go to prison. The soldiers came to his defense. They said that without his help it would not have been possible to kill the monster. The advisor furiously replied that all the dead and wounded also contributed, and without their sacrifices, Yi would not have succeeded. Moreover, the scorpion was wounded in the previous battle with them, so Nin was just lucky. However, the wars stood their ground, saying that without him there would have been many more casualties. But it seemed impossible to convince Zhang. He insisted on punishing the young man for pretending to be one of them. Tianji asked Fu for advice. Ding replied that if he really became an advisor, it would require a review of the matter. The officer stated that advisors undergo a strict selection process, especially since he could be guided by other intentions. After which Zhang ordered his wards to immediately detain Ning for further consideration of the case by senior management. The soldiers continued to defend the young master in vain, calling him a good man. The guy said in his defense that he killed a dangerous demon, and they suspect him of ulterior motives, adding that in this case he would be forced to resist them. Old Man Kong and Ding tried to persuade Yi to surrender so that he could explain everything to his superiors. Ning once again urged Fu to tell the truth about what happened, because he arranged it all himself, and is not worthy to wear this uniform. Tianyi menacingly declared that he did not dare to blame anyone for his pretense, and besides, he could not escape from justice. In response, the future king said that they could not cope with him and he could prove his innocence. After all, the commanding officer of Xing County is Inspector Qing, and Ding was put in his place. Why did this happen? Fu retorted that Qing was in the city of Lin, where he was in charge of military operations, and tomorrow he would see him in person. However, the main character claimed that in fact the inspector was detained and is in custody. At this moment, Xiao wrote to the gentleman that she had found him. He ordered her to immediately bring an officer. Ken said that he came here because of him, but when Ning explains everything to the management, everything will work out. The director greatly upset the young master, as he stated, suggesting that he was in league with the demonic cultivators. The old man replied that they observed law and order and had not done anything bad to anyone. Zhang could not stand it and said that the guy had definitely chosen the wrong path. Yi hastened to report that they had chosen the wrong road and everything would end badly for the demonic cultivators. A moment later, Xiao arrived with the exhausted Inspector Qing, having said that he gentleman was right, and the officer was indeed in prison. Everyone present was stunned by such an unexpected turn of events. Ning said he snuck into their prison and pulled out the inspector, asking why he was there. The soldiers were perplexed and did not understand why they did this to Qing. Suddenly one of the officers said that the guy was simply incredible and asked how he discovered his plan. As it turned out, it was Chen Yang. He never thought that the young man would find and free the inspector. Yi stated that he sacrificed hundreds of people just to detain him, and this cannot be called the salvation of humanity. The soldiers were stunned that Yang had actually organized the monster attack on the area. Chen said that Ning still did not understand what the true meaning of the new era was and the sacrifices from the military were not enough, adding that they didn't really bring demons, but only so that people would become stronger, and without deaths this cannot be done. Moreover, they previously wounded the scorpion so that it would not cause too much harm and not endanger the townspeople. And all this can be classified not as an attack by demons, but as a military exercise in conditions close to combat. However, the Qing officer opposes their methods, while in the new era there is no slack, and good people do not hold weapons in their hands, who only think about protecting people, so a senior commander will not be of any use to them, especially when real danger appears. After which Ian tried to win the guy over to his side, saying that he definitely has talent, and this is the best option for him. In addition, he has a bodyguard of the Golden Core phase, and they, in turn, have 4 such advisors. But everyone was well aware that this would not be enough to resist the military. At this moment, Old Man Kong said that Chen had no right to harm Yi, since they had not agreed on this. Yang again tried to force Ning to surrender, because he had 3,000 warriors behind him and he could not escape. Meanwhile, one of the girls climbed onto a horse tied to the young master's cart. The horses were against such children's games. And Qingzhou suddenly woke up and went outside with Daji sleeping in her arms. The horses rejoiced and began to ask Tang for help. The children recognized her as a saint and bowed to her. Zhou asked what was going on with their plan. The girl talked about how Yang intervened in the situation and now the young man definitely couldn't escape. But Qingzhou was unhappy, because she asked Zhang and Chen to simply lure Yi to their side. The girl said that this was the order of the third elder, since even if Ning joined them, he would not be controlled. And so Elser's son wants them to take him to the demonic altar, and then the young master will turn into a demon. Tan became furious and asked where Yang and the others were now, but the girls began to assure her that this was a good plan, especially since she herself was holding his little daughter hostage. Zhou stated that he is the king and even Chen will not be able to defeat him, because Ye's strength also lies in the number of allies. In this regard, Qingzhou ordered them to take her to Yang before it was too late. The girls agreed and led Tang along. At this time, Ning explained to Chen that they really had 3,000 soldiers, but do not forget about the 20,000 residents of the district. And he offered to tell a story. Ian gladly agreed to listen to him, since he was in no hurry. This is the story of Desmond Thomas Doss. He was an ordinary soldier and when he didn't see Qin, he thought that the elder was not knowledgeable. But when he didn't come to the party and no one noticed his absence, the guy decided to conduct a test. And after killing the monster, Fu said that there were no materials there. Ning considered him inexperienced, because not much time had passed since the day of the new era. And then he deliberately announced his departure that night, and specially emphasized this. In a moment, the young man reminded him of their leader. Ian was taken aback by this similarity. The main character noted that he initially thought it was a coincidence, but when Chen appeared, he realized that Yang was in the area originally. Returning to the real story of Desmond, he said that Doss, like all his peers, then ended up at the front. But unlike the others, he had his own prejudices. He enlisted in the army but refused to take up arms. Subject to constant ridicule from his commander and his comrades, he was mocked and later court-martialed. However, they were unable to shake his faith in God, and Thomas continued to follow his beliefs. And when everyone tried to hold their positions and fought hard, sacrificing themselves, and there were countless victims. And Doss, whom everyone considered a coward, returned after the battle to a field strewn with corpses and wounded. He saved 75 soldiers. Literally in his arms he pulled the guys out, and Desmond later received the highest award, a Medal of Honor. Ning stated that he would never understand this and sometimes it is not necessary to take up arms to fight a war. And even if a new era has arrived, people have accumulated enough knowledge from past wars. In addition, there are people who do not know how to fight, but can save a wounded man, and they are, in a way, also soldiers. Specialists capable of creating weapons are also necessary, and any commander knows that reliable logistics is the key to success. And Yang sends people to slaughter without ever finding out what exactly a person can be useful for, and abuses his power. And everyone he called weaklings is actually the backbone of their country. And the dead soldiers could have grown up in their field and been extremely useful, and their deaths are on Chen's conscience. The soldiers, in turn, supported Yi and said that Yang was not worthy to be called a military man and wear their uniform. Director Kang suddenly repented and asked Ning for forgiveness for his actions. Ding also admitted his guilt and said that he approved the monster attack because the chief inspector had already been detained. Xiao admired her master and realized that he would indeed become a good king in the future. At that moment, Fu said that it was he who ordered the guy to put on a military uniform and should appear before the tribunal. The soldiers and officers became furious again, realizing that they had been betrayed by people they trusted. Bai watched what was happening, noting that the influence of the young master as a ruler was gradually beginning to manifest itself. An enraged Chen stated that they were pointlessly rebelling against him and the demonic sect, and now, because of one person, they can lose their lives, but military advisors helped them. At this time, Senior Inspector Qin said that they were imposters, since he was the real commander of Xian County. Even Zhang tried to calm Yang down, saying that at the moment they could not go against everyone and detain the young man. However, the despicable Chen had a different opinion and, drawing his blade, said that he would forcefully return Yi to the demonic sect, after which he instantly rushed to the attack, calling on his demons to detain Ning. Xiao defended her master and declared that she would deal with Yang herself. Meanwhile, Qingzhou came running and saw the snake fighting with Chen. Tan understood that after today's incident, she would no longer be able to strengthen her influence among the military. And Yang and the third elder brought trouble to the demonic sect by underestimating Yi. Xiao and Chen continued to fight, inflicting crushing blows on each other. The enraged cultivator said that she was only at the beginning stage of the golden core and she would not be able to cope with it. But the snake said that in fact Ning is the future king and only he will save this world. And she, in turn, will do everything to make this happen and kill Ian. Chen himself did not understand how such a weak cultivator could resist him. At a certain moment, Xiao Qing managed to catch him and successfully carried out the attack. As a result, Yang literally flew into the building, breaking through the wall. The demon was shocked and said that this was impossible, because he was stronger than her. The main character watched what was happening, realizing that the true strength of a soldier lies in morale. The young master tried to convey this to Chen, but he did not agree with this statement, stating that he did everything for the benefit of the demonic cult and a newcomer to the golden core phase was not a hindrance to him. After which Ian instantly flew out of the house, heading towards the snake. However, Xiao Qing, in turn, again dealt a crushing blow, and Chen subsequently collapsed to the ground. The demonic cultivator called on his advisors to arrest Yi. At this moment, all the soldiers led by Inspector Qing said that he could not get Ning. The advisors helped Ian get up and said that they really wouldn't be able to capture him now. Urging him to retreat immediately, Xiao rushed to stop them again. The monsters, suddenly turning into disgusting monsters, fled. The snake asked the master for forgiveness for having missed the demons, and the young man hastened to calm her down. The soldiers, as it turned out, did not waste any time and recorded everything that happened on video, which, in principle, was also a good idea for everyone around to know the truth about the pseudo-military advisors. At this time, Qingru suddenly showed up, carrying Daji in her arms, and asked if her hubby was okay. Inspector Qin asked who she was. Xiao called her a witch and ordered her not to approach them. As soon as Tang tried to justify herself, Yi accused her of knowing about this trap for him. But Zhou denied this and said that Chen himself came up with everything, and she did not even think about leading him to the demonic altar. However, Ning claimed that she was involved in organizing the monster attack on Xing County, and initially they planned to create unrest in which he would show himself in order to invite him to join the military advisors. And becoming their subordinate, he would carry out her orders to protect the remaining cities and people, hinting that this is the right choice. But the future ruler said that they deliberately arranged all this in order to prevent him from getting to Mount Kunlun. In addition, she now wants to use Daji to threaten him, but Tan again began to deny everything. Yi asked why Zhou was so reluctant to let him get to Kunlun Mountain. Qingzhou once again avoided answering, asking him to allow her to stay by his side, because he is her husband. The main character understood that her cultivation was sealed and still intended to find out the true intentions of the demons from her. Yi then ordered Xiao to go with him and allowed Tang to follow them. The demonic children noticed that the saints' acting skills were amazing, but they did not understand why they needed to follow Ning. Zhou, in turn, demanded from them the little thing that the great elder gave them. one of the girls took out the yin-yang cauldrons and handed them to the demon queen. Qingzhou said that the path of the future ruler is full of trials and he will soon need double cultivation, so the boilers will help. The next morning, Shao Qing came into her master's room. The snake offered to give him a massage after the grueling journey, but Yi refused. When leaving, Shao advised him to look at the forum, where there were a huge number of posts about him. Ning decided to look at people's comments on the forum, where naturally everyone admired him and called him a defender of humanity. The main character understood that even the advent of a new era did not stop journalists. They wrote that the great young master was able to overpower the military advisors, forcing them to flee. People also distributed photographs, and his statements were divided into quotes. Suddenly, someone knocked on his door. Yi assumed that it was Shao who had returned for some reason. However, Qingzhou was standing on the threshold. She asked to use his bathroom, since hers was supposedly broken. Tan once again used her feminine tricks, but Ning did not fall for them and showed where the bathroom was. He himself went to have breakfast. Zhou again began to make friends, asking him to bring her something to eat. After a while, they packed their things and hurried to leave Xian County. Qin and Kong began to persuade the guy to stay and join the army. The inspector said that he had informed the command about his help. But the young man replied that at the moment he was definitely not ready to discuss this, because he had urgent matters. Shui again watched him from the side and understood that he would need her help, especially since the authorities found out about his existence. At this time, information appeared on the forum that the author of that very red sparkling star was Yi. The military advisors, in turn, began to actively discuss the future ruler at the meeting. The third elder stated that the young man's behavior had gone beyond what was permitted and the elite of the demonic cult must take action. Moreover, the Holy Queen Qingru remains close to Ning, which means that he is important to her and the authorities can easily guess this. After which the meeting ended and the elder received a message from Chen, who spoke about the failed task. The old man assured him that he himself would lead the guy to the altar this time, without resorting to the resources of the army, so that there would be no problems. The demon ruler never thought that 4 high-ranking cultivators would not be able to handle Yi. Meanwhile, in the city of Ran, where Liner could not understand why Bai put the doll on display, Su immediately wrote to the young author that his devoted fan was looking forward to seeing him in Ran City. A couple of minutes later, Ning replied that he would arrive in the city by tomorrow and asked for the 4th technique in connection with his breakthrough. Lin was sincerely happy about this and began to think about what gift to prepare for him. However, no ideas came to mind. Couldn't come up with a worthy gift for the main character for a long time. Suddenly the bird advised her to give herself as a gift, because he, as a man, would obviously like it. Su jumped up sharply and praised the rather intelligent creature for her practical advice. At this time, the main character finally started another breakthrough and began to cultivate. Shao, in turn, confronted the monsters that appeared on the way to Mount Kunlun. Qingzhou understood perfectly well that the number of monsters would only increase as they approached the mountain. It is worth noting that the snake fought quite bravely and ultimately defeated the demons. So far, the young master has successfully moved to the next stage of development. Yi decided to look at his characteristics, where he was already at the 4th level of the Golden Core, which was the middle phase of foundation formation, but at the same time Ning felt much better. But Daji, unfortunately, was still sleeping and could not wake up. Coming out of the cart, the future king saw Shao fighting with monsters and asked her to leave her a couple of monsters. Qingru decided to ask him what level he was already at. Yi proudly stated that he was level 4 in the middle phase of Golden Core formation. Then he easily dealt with the low-level demons and called on the snake to collect materials from them, which they would exchange in Ran. Ning asked Tang if the influence of the demonic sect was spreading in Rongcheng. The saint confirmed his guesses, but since this is a military administrative center, the power of their cult is limited. And at present, the situation in the city is not completely clear, so they will only be able to find out upon arrival. The guy asked if another surprise was waiting for him there. Ro assured him that future events would benefit him. It seemed to the young man that she was not lying, but in any case he should be extremely careful. After some time, they approached the city where the main military forces of mankind were concentrated. Yi noticed that this city was more like a huge fortress, because there were more than 20 Julin pagodas alone. Ning asked Shao to return those 2 things to him and remove the cart, which is what the snake began to do. Approaching the entrance to Rongcheng, Tang assumed that Bai was also in the city. The main character drew attention to the thermobaric weapons installed on the towers. The future king tried not to stand out from the crowd in order to find Liner as soon as possible. However, his plan failed as the girls instantly recognized him and began shouting his name. After some time, he was literally surrounded by reporters and began to ask about all his exploits. They also did not ignore Qin Gru, asking if she was the one who robbed Yi. Tang happily confirmed their assumptions. Xiao noticed that the gentleman seemed to have nowhere to hide from the popularity that had fallen on him. Su heard about Ning's arrival from the news and thought that he liked having female fans surrounding him. At that moment, Mo Lu came to her. Lin thanked him for ensuring the guy's safety on this difficult path. The old man replied that in comparison with her merits, his exploits were not so great and the future was naturally in the hands of youth. Realizing that ordinary cultivators were no match for Lu, asked if he had noticed anything unusual or special. Mo said that when he approached E closer than 100 meters, a certain aura appeared, but after that he did not feel it. Su noticed that he had very little time left to rise to the top, and it was surprising how any of the monsters could approach him. The old man said that the demonic sect also has powerful representatives, and they act extremely intelligently. Meanwhile, the main character and Xiao walked deeper into the city and suddenly saw a flying silver griffin. All the people, in turn, began to run away in panic in different directions. One of the representatives of the law instantly rushed to confront the huge beast. The cultivator was able to wound the griffin's wing, and it seemed that the monster was defeated. At that moment, an unknown girl approached the young master and said that he had nothing to fear, because he was a low-level demon. Suddenly, another griffin appeared. He couldn't understand why the city didn't even announce an alarm. It turned out to be a routine for Ron. As reported by Chen Xia, who identified herself as the deputy commander of Liner, Ning was surprised that Su had such a high position. Xia said that was too busy with official duties, so she would take him to the city first. At this time, unknown demons were watching the future ruler, noting the guy's excessive mediocrity. Another was talking to someone on the phone and wondering why he had not been captured yet. The main character was suddenly struck by an obsessive thought that someone was watching him. Chen urged him not to pay attention to people's looks, adding that after the advent of the new era, the demonic sect and their 9th level of heaven are actively recruiting adepts. In addition to them, new factions have also appeared, especially since he has attracted a lot of attention, so they may even try to kidnap him. And negotiations in this case are unnecessary, since all types of resources are relatively scarce in the new era. In this connection, they adhere to the tactics of kidnapping, rather than throwing away a lot of money and not knowing what it will lead to. Xia assured Ning that he had no need to worry about this, because he was under their protection and their strength was much more powerful than anyone else in the city. At that moment, smoke bombs flew at them. The adjutant noticed that kidnappers usually use this method. The guy said with concern that they were going to kidnap him. Chen, in turn, began to calm the master. The future lord loudly declared that he was in the middle of the golden core stage and they could not intimidate him. Suddenly, someone's voice shouted that he admitted his mistake and this would not happen again. When the smoke cleared, unknown people were lying on the ground, whom the soldiers successfully detained. Smiling and absolutely calm, Xia said that the gentleman was not in danger and was completely safe. He thought he saw a suspicious man in the restaurant before the attack, but after the incident he was no longer there. Meanwhile, they approached a place similar to the Colosseum. He asked what it was. Chen called it an arena where cultivators fight. Indeed, on the path to improvement, conflicts occur between demons and divine adepts, which they resolve here. At this time, an unknown girl tried to lure Ning into the arena to fight, but the young master refused. However, it was at this moment that the elevator suddenly stopped. Xia assumed that the electricity had gone out. The young master said that in such cases, the elevator's backup generator should be activated. Deputy Su agreed with him, but for some reason he was not there. He suspected something was wrong. Realizing that with his level of cultivation the elevator was not a hindrance to him, Ning began to punch his way out with his fists. After some time, the wall collapsed along with the door and they finally left the elevator. But what happened next defied any logic. There was a whole city both on earth and in heaven, as if there had been a glitch in reality.